For most people, if everyone hates you, you're probably doing something wrong. But for Andrew Tate, it was the complete opposite. The more hate he got, the more powerful he seemed to become. He spun this whole myth around himself, creating an image that convinced millions of young men that he, and only he, held the secret to escaping a life of mediocrity. And for a while, it actually worked. Today, we're going to unpack the story of how this controversial internet icon built a massive empire, and how it all came crashing down.
So how did this all go down? Well, we're going to break it down into 5 key parts. We'll start with his rise and how he built the myth. Then we'll look at the shady methods he used to build his empire. We'll hit the turning point, the peak of his fame and his dramatic arrest. After that, his wild pivot into the world of crypto. And finally, we'll cover the massive series of scandals that are unraveling everything he built.
All right, let's rewind and start from the top. Because to really get how the whole thing collapsed, you have to understand how it was built in the first place. We're going back to his early days, tracing the path from a pretty normal family to his very first and very public taste of scandal.
So Andrew and his brother Tristan, they didn't come from money. Their dad was a well-known chess master, their mama homemaker. The boys got into combat sports, which, takes a ton of discipline. But that wasn't giving them the fame they wanted. So Andrew decided to take a shortcut, reality TV. It totally backfired. He got kicked off the show after a video of him assaulting a woman on the show went viral. Now, for most people, that's a career ender, right? But not for Tate. No way. That was his launch pad. He took all that negativity and leaned right into it, using the controversy to build his entire online brand as the ultimate alpha male.
Okay, so this is where things get really interesting. We have to talk about how he actually built this empire. He was selling the stream lifestyle, the Bugattis, the private jets, the mansions. But the engine that was funding all of it was, and he admitted this himself, built on exploiting women. And look, this isn't just some rumor or speculation. This comes straight from the man himself. In an interview, he literally bragged about the sheer scale of his webcam business. Over 75 women, spread across 4 different countries. This operation was the financial cornerstone of that whole lavish lifestyle he was showing off online every single day. Let this number sink in for a second. $600,000. And that wasn't a one-time thing. That was his reported income every single month, just from the webcam business. That's the money that paid for the jets, the supercars, and the whole image of untouchable success that he sold to his followers. So how'd he do it? Well, he had this incredibly cynical name for his method. He called it his PhD course, and it was a cold, calculated 3-step process. First, you lure women in with promises of a rich lifestyle. Second, you make them emotionally dependent, a lot of times by promising to marry them. And then step 3, once they're hooked, you exploit them, emotionally and financially. And the craziest part, he later packaged this disgusting method and sold it to his followers as a course. And it didn't stop with the webcam business. Oh no. Then came the war room. For over $600 a month, he promised his followers elite secret knowledge. He literally taught them how to monetize hate and turn public outrage into profit. But here's the kicker. People who actually paid for it, they found it was mostly just fluff, generic advice you could find for free online, all wrapped up in some seriously slick marketing. It proved he wasn't a life expert. He was a marketing expert. Okay, so this is it. This is the moment everything changes. The absolute peak of his global fame and the long arm of the law collide head-on, and it's incredibly dramatic. Just think about that for a minute. In 2022, he was the most searched man on the entire internet. I mean, more than world leaders, more than A-list celebrities, more than superstar athletes. His face was everywhere. His clips were all over social media. His podcast views were in the millions. His influence was just undeniable. He was at the absolute summit of internet fame. And then, just as he's at the absolute top of the world, it all comes crashing down. That very same year, 2022, boom, he and his brother are arrested in their compound in Romania. And these weren't some minor charges. We're talking human trafficking, running an organized crime group, and money laundering. The ugly foundation of his entire empire was suddenly on display for the whole world to see. Now, you'd think an arrest like that would be the end, right? But this is where Tate's marketing brain, if you want to call it that, really kicks in. He gets out of prison, and instead of laying low, he pulls off this masterful pivot. He wasn't a criminal anymore. He was a martyr. And then he dives headfirst into the absolute chaos of the crypto world. Almost immediately, the news stories started. From his prison cell, he starts painting this picture of a huge conspiracy. He's not a criminal, no. He's a victim. He's being attacked by the Matrix, this shadowy, powerful group that's trying to silence him because he speaks the truth. He even claimed they were trying to poison him. It was a perfect narrative to rally his followers and frame himself as some kind of freedom fighter.
And you just can't make this stuff up. Look at the whiplash here. In 2023, he is on record clear as day saying crypto is a scam for losers. He said it was just a tool to exploit your followers. Then you fast forward just 1 year to 2024, and suddenly he's launching his own crypto coin called Daddy, promising it's going to hit $1 billion. And oh, by the way, you should totally buy his crypto trading course. The hypocrisy is just staggering.
Well, this huge pivot didn't exactly fly under the radar. Guys like the investigator CoffeeZilla started digging in, and what they found was a pattern. Tate would promote these coins, his followers would pile in, the price would pump, and then it would crash, leaving them with nothing. And Tate's response when he got called out? Well, it was classic Tate. No debate, no facts. He just sicked his army of followers on his critics, telling them to harass and attack anyone who questioned him. And that brings us to where we are now, the final chapter, you could say. The great unraveling. This is where the whole thing just starts to fall apart at the seams, collapsing under the weight of all the legal battles and his own increasingly bizarre behavior. The legal pressure just became this global nightmare for him. It wasn't just Romania anymore. All of a sudden, the UK is investigating him for fraud and tax evasion. Then he tries to make this big move to the US in 2025, and boom, the feds are immediately on him. He basically has to flee back to Romania. And right now, he's facing 21 brand new lawsuits just in the UK. His life has become a constant cycle of court appearances and legal filings. And then, in what has to be one of the most incredible self-sabotages of all time, one of his biggest allies accidentally blows up his spot. The streamer Aiden Ross is on a live stream and just casually lets it slip that Tate is planning to flee Romania while he's under house arrest. Of course, the authorities heard about it immediately, and any chance of escape was gone. So as the walls are closing in, his behavior just gets more and more erratic. You can see the desperation. He sues Facebook and the BBC for defamation. A really disturbing old video surfaces of him with a 15-year-old girl. Out of nowhere, he announces he's going to run for Prime Minister of the UK. And maybe wildest of all, after a political assassination, he tweets just 2 words, civil war, causing a massive panic before his brother had to jump online and try to walk it back. So what's the result of all this? Well, the constant chaos, the legal battles, the hypocrisy. It all took its toll. The guy who was once literally the most Googled man on Earth, he's become a bit of a sideshow. His core group of fans has shrunk, and a lot of the people who used to idolize him are now publicly trying to get as far away from him as possible. He's still online, of course, but the magic, that massive influence, it's gone. At the end of the day, the empire built on controversy just couldn't sustain itself. But his story, it really leaves us with a huge question, doesn't it? How does someone who so openly bragged about his exploitative methods become a hero to millions of young men? And what does his spectacular rise and even more spectacular fall tell us about internet fame, about influence, and about the kinds of dark, powerful communities that can grow in the corners of our online world? That's definitely something to think about.